What is up, everybody? Mr. PowerScripts here. We are going to try to run through the code base for the Reddit Karma farming bot, and I'm just going to try to explain how it works. I have not done this since the 1.0 version of the bot, and we've had so many things added since then, and there's probably a lot of code here that I'm going to struggle with explaining, but I'm going to do my best to move through what happens between starting the run Linux script, which is what most people use to run the bot, and the bot's life cycle and how different commands work. Maybe we'll even find some bugs. So let's just jump right into it. This is the run Linux script. These are all of the files in the repository here. A lot of this stuff is just setup files. So pip file, a pip.lock, that's related to our dependencies. Requirements is dependencies. Runtime.txt, this is Heroku stuff. Proc file is Heroku. App.json is also Heroku. So there's a lot of stuff in this top level folder that is just there to inform the environment that we need. If you're in Heroku, tell Heroku things that we need. So these are just a lot of configuration files. The real action is in the source folder, which is the actual code of the bot itself and not just a bunch of this configuration stuff. And then we have the run Linux script, which is a script that I tell everybody to try and use. So you run linux.sh and the bot starts. What happens? Well, there are different kinds of Linux environments. And so we need to detect which Linux environment we're in. And we have this debug file. I have a lot of commands that get teed out to a debug file so that when people are having issues, they can just share this run Linux log and I can see where did their script fail. So first what we do is we output a timestamp, and then we want to get the machine type that we're in so that we know what we can do. So there's the Mac machine type, there's the Linux, and then we do different things based on those. If it's CGWin or MinGW, then we don't do anything. So here we echo the system is this. So we put that in the log, we put it in the console. Here, I think that we're grabbing this is just a funky way of getting the path to the source directory. So basically this source directory here, I'm pretty sure that it's going to install everything within this directory. So it checks to see if there's a virtual environment. The virtual environment is where all of the Python dependencies get installed. So the bot doesn't install the dependencies on your host system. It creates this virtual environment and then it installs everything in there. So we can see if there was no virtual environment detected, then we assume that this is the first time that you ran the bot, and so you need to install the dependencies. So once we've checked that we need to install the dependencies, we go and check the machine type. And so we're looking for Linux because this is designed for Linux. There's separate steps if you are using Mac OS, and you'll see that we don't have a suitable Linux version. I didn't do any installations for Mac OS. You kind of have to manually do them, but I could add the brew installation for a bunch of these things that the bot needs. Didn't get to that though. We check, we see, is this Linux? It is Linux. Okay, I'm going to assume that it's a Debian-based Linux, and we're going to be able to apt-get update, and we're going to install a bunch of these dependencies that the bot needs to run. Python 3.6, Python pip, setup tools, deb, a bunch of other stuff. So once we've installed the dependencies those are actually the operating system dependencies. This is stuff that gets installed on Linux. So this is what this actually updates your virtual machine or wherever you install this to include Python 3.6, pip, and all that stuff. And once that is installed, once the operating system environment is set up properly, we can move on to configuring the bot environment. And so the bot environment uses the Python virtual environment here. And so you'll see we're doing pip3 install virtual environment. So we install virtual environment, and then we create our virtual environment. So that's what this command here is. It's virtual virtual env, and then we're getting our path to Python 3, I think. Yeah, and then we're creating a folder called venv. So after that, we have to activate the virtual environment. So we source venv bin activate. I have no idea why this pip3 install Cython is here. I'm pretty sure I fixed it so that we don't need that. No, wait, we do, because it's not using pipenv. We need to install pipenv. Anyway, the way it works right now is that it manually installs Cython first, because some of the requirements in here need Cython in order to be installed. So we have to install it first, and then we can install the Python requirements, and then the bot has its environment, its Python environment set up with all of its Python dependencies to run. So that sets up the Python dependencies. And then we move down here and we're activating the virtual environment again. I don't know why. It's already active up here. Oh, I guess it's because I run this on Mac OS, and so no, that's just extra code at this point. Okay, haven't looked at this for a long time, but we activate the virtual environment twice, it seems. No, that's a lie. Okay, so if we detect that the virtual environment exists, we don't need to do all that installation. So that's why this does not execute if a virtual environment exists. So then we just go down here and we know a virtual environment does exist, so we can just go directly to activate it. So once that's activated, our Python shell has access to all of the Python dependencies that we've installed in the virtual environment. So we activate it, and now we can just call the bot. So you'll see here, we call Python 3 directly, and then we call run.py. And what we also do here, this is just special shell syntax that says take all of the parameters that were supplied to this shell script and pass them to run.py. So this is how you can run the bot by supplying the client ID, the username, all of that info in settings.py you can supply to this script, and this script will pass it to run.py, and run.py will say, oh, you passed that information through the command line arguments, so I will use the settings from the command line arguments, and I don't need them in settings.py. So that's all this does. This just takes everything that you pass to the shell script and it passes it to run.py. And so we start run.py, and this is where the bot actually starts. Run.py in source. So let's go to source and see what's going in run.py. What's going on in run.py if I want to finish my sentences. Over here, we have something very simple. We have two things happening. We are starting a web app, and then we're starting init. If I was smart, I would have named this run.py init, and then this init would be run.run. But I did everything backwards, and I'm embarrassed by this whole code base. And so this is just an artifact of just a lot of stuff being built and changed and updated over time without any rhyme or reason. Don't ever code like this. This is not a how-to on writing good code. This is basically an overview of really bad code that somehow works. So we start run.py, and basically we just check to see, is this the main Python process? Is this the Python process that was invoked? And name will be equal to main if it is. So we're using Python multi-threading to start a background process. And the background process is our web app, because now the bot has a little web interface that shows you graphs. It has some of the user information, and it's all done with Flask. So we'll see that we're importing web from webapp, and then we're just setting this function called run, which is within webapp, and this is the target for the process. And so it just runs that, and we tell it to start, and then it does that in the background, and we move on. So if we just check here, this is webapp. This is it here. This is a Python module. We have an init file here, and it's just a little Flask app. That's it. It's Flask. We have a bunch of DB stuff. This is the new DB. We'll look at that file in a little bit, but we create our Flask app, and then we get the port. We check to see if port is defined as an environment variable. That we know we're on Heroku. If not, just set it to 5,000, and then we have some routes here. So if you go to the server and you go to the main route, what happens here? This is the ugliest thing ever. Don't ever do this, ever. Like never do something like this. But basically, we're grabbing the user info from our little personal database. Now, this database is separate from the Brain database. The Brain database is managed by Kobe. It has all of the learned comments and stuff like that, but I've created a separate database using TinyDB, which is a little lightweight Python document-oriented database. And so we can pull things out of it as JSON, like the user info, and we can assign it to user. And then we get our database size, which is also in this new little database. We record the database size in there. And another thing we do is that we save the database information over time. So every time we check the database size, it gets added as, think of it as a row in the database. And so we can create charts and graphs when we have those sizes over time. And also down here, we track the karma. Every time we check the user's karma, we store that in the database. So basically, this process, this little endpoint here, is grabbing a bunch of database information, and then this is just a Flask thing. We pass it to this template as a parameter called data, and then the template is here. It's called dashboard, which lives in the templates folder. And if we look at dashboard, you'll see we have these. This is Jinja, or I think it's Jinja 2. I think Flask uses Jinja 2, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, so this is a templating format. So we can add these little these little references in here that say, hey, that data object that you passed into render template, I want to call that. I want to call that here, and I want to show the database information. Or here, we're looking at data.allDatabase, and we convert that to JSON directly into this HTML. It converts it to a static HTML page with the JSON data for the database stuff embedded in it. Again, never do this. Don't ever do anything like this, but this was the quickest way to do it at like 3 o'clock in the morning whenever I did it. But you can see here from the database data, we have the timestamp of when we check the database, and we also have the data itself, which is the size, the value in megabytes. So we do this little mapping here to create a list of the labels, which is the timestamp, and then the data itself, which is the database size. And then we pass those into, this is charts.js. I just copied, pasted some charts.js stuff. But you'll see here we add the labels, we add the data, and then this automatically creates a chart based off of the data that we had in our new little database schema. So that's how the web app works. It's just this little Python module here. It's a little Flask application, and we have some routes defined. And this is that run. This is, you can see it here. It's a function called run, and it just does app.run. This is app. App was defined up here as a Flask app, and then we added some routes to it. And then down here, we can tell it to run. So if we close that and we go back to run.py over here, we'll see that we're literally just running that function, and that function starts a Flask web server. It's the development web server. You're not supposed to use it, but since no more than one person is typically going to be looking at the Reddit bot output, it's fine for this kind of purpose. So it starts that web app, it starts it in the background, and then we move on to the next thing. And the next thing is init, and this is the actual Reddit bot itself. So the web app is completely abstracted from the bot code. It's a separate thing. But we have init. And init is just another Python file, and it has a function called init. So let's go find init. We have init here. And this is what manages the life cycle of the bot. So every second you'll see the bot is running these probabilities that decide what action it should run. And that's where, this is the file where that's managed. So you'll see that we have to import a lot of stuff. Not only does the web app interact with our new little database, but the Reddit bot itself also interacts with this new database. So we're importing a bunch of these database functions that I have in db.py. We'll look at those later. So we import all these different things, and this is how the bot interacts with our new database. We have utils.py. You all know utils.py. That's where we have a lot of environment variables that are set. And so we import those environment variables so that we can use them when the bot starts running. We also have a bunch of these functions, Reddit bot action. So we're just pulling stuff to get ready to run init. Now, what happens here? I don't know if this works anymore, but this used to be a way to just check like your IP, see if you have internet. If you don't have internet, then I think it just tells the bot not to run. If you do, and we can get the public IP, we display it here. And then we're just setting some variables. Now, somebody, I forget who it was. Oh gosh, I forget who did it. But somebody added rate limiting to all of the bot actions. And that made things a lot more complex because I'm not entirely sure how it works. But basically, the bot was running into a lot of issues where people were hitting the API too hard, or they were setting actions to run too quickly. And so now all of the actions are, they go through this sort of wrapper that checks if we're hitting the Reddit API too many times, and it will delay actions or cancel actions based off of whether or not we're hitting the API too hard. So that's what these variables, we're kind of setting that up here. This is the rate limit, this is need to wait, and then we use those later on. This is here the first message of the bot running, new bot run. We output who the user is, so we're using the API. This is the Reddit, this is praw. Basically, we're using it directly, reddit.api.user.me. So whoever is logged in, it just gets their username, and then we're outputting that here as a string. And then these are the actions. These are the different actions that the bot can perform. And also, we have their probabilities as well. And those are set in utils.py. So you can see here, we import all of the probabilities. Here's the probabilities. And then when we want to access a specific probability, we just put the name in here. So basically, this is saying if it's time to run shadow check, Reddit bot action shadow check, well, shadow check is this function. So run this function. And this function should run based off of this probability, and I have no idea what these zeros are for because I didn't write this bit of code. So here we are. We have our named actions: shadow check, checking if we're shadow banned; karma check, which is just checking what our current karma is for commenting and posting; and then database check, checking our current database size; making a reply, reposting something, or checking to see if we have any bad comments or posts that we can delete. So these actions are tied to specific functions, and you'll see that these functions come from different places. This is from the database file. This is also from the database. These are from our Reddit file, which has a bunch of Reddit functions. So these are the actions. This is everything the bot can do. And those all go into this Reddit bot variable. It's going to get hard for me to explain this from here on out because a lot of people have helped work on this code and I haven't looked at it for a while. But here's our init file. So run starts init, right? So init, this is this init function right here. And we start off the init function by showing what database size we need before we can start replying. And we output that. And then, so you'll see that it's the variable here. And then we check to see if it's shadow banned. First thing we do every time we start the bot, check and see if we're shadow banned. If we're shadow banned, don't run the bot. Next, we want to set the user info. We have access to the user info using the Reddit pro object, but this way we can store it in the database and we can change things and update things. So first thing we do, get the user information, set it in the database. Next, this is a database function. We just check to see if this is the first time that we ran the bot. So we can actually go into the database.py and see that function here. So it does a search. This is a bunch of database code. We haven't looked at it yet, but it does a search to see if a key called first run exists. If that key exists, then this is not the first run. If the key does, wait, what did I just say there? Let me try that again. If the key does not exist, then this is the first run. So we'll do this code block where it goes to database dates and it inserts the first run key with the current timestamp. And so this is how the bot knows if it has been, this is how the bot can tell how long it's been since the first time it ran, because now the bot has a schedule and the schedule can change over time. So we need to know the first time that the bot ran in order for us to adjust the schedule based off of how old we think the bot is. So this may not be the best way to do it, but this is how it works right now. We create a key that has the very first time that we ran the bot in the database. And if it already exists, we don't do anything. We just say this is not the first run ever, and we move on. That's not what I wanted to do. Okay, so cool. We checked if it's the first run. If it's the first run, put it in the database so that we can do cool things with that information later. Also, set the database size. First thing we do, even if the database size is 0, this just checks to make sure that the database is there and that we have a size set, because we also have another command called get database size, and this checks the database size from our new database. So it checks the code, but the brain file database size value that is in the new database that we have, the TinyDB database. So we need to have the value in there. So we just run this every single time, and that makes sure that there's a value in here. So here is where things kind of change a little bit. This is while true. This is the loop. Every time you see the bot iterate, it's going through this loop and it's running this process over and over and over. You'll see that we have a sleep here. It does a countdown. Well, it's supposed to be a countdown, but it does a sleep. I used to have the bot wait like 10 seconds between iterations. Oh yeah, 10 minutes. It used to do 10-minute iterations, but then I found it was easier to do things in 1 second intervals and then just run actions based off of probabilities rather than doing some action every 10 minutes. So this is just, it's the wrong name because this is what it used to be called. But this is a sleep statement. So the bot will sleep for 1 second and then it will run all of this stuff again. So while true is always going to be true. So we're never going to break out of this loop. And yeah, so it's just a 1 second loop. It goes through all this stuff. It waits a second and it goes through all this stuff again. So what is it doing? Well, this is where we do the fast learning. So if the database size, if the current database size is less than the size of our main database minimum size, then we need to fast learn. And you'll see that if this is less than this, then it's true. And so we will go into fast learning mode and we will learn, and then it'll output the new database size. And then we set the database size in our database again, so that when we go through this check one more time, it will have the latest information. So we wait 2 seconds between learning intervals. So I guess you could make this 1 second and it would learn a bit faster, but it's possible that you would run into rate limits with Reddit. But then again, the bot has built-in rate limiting, so maybe that doesn't matter so much anymore. So yeah, until our database size is big enough, keep learning. So it's just going through this while true learn. Okay. Then it goes down here and it goes to check this next if statement. And this next if statement is get DB size bigger than our minimum brain database size. If it's bigger, then run all of this stuff. So what happens is it goes through here, it does the fast learning, and if it needs to fast learn, then it probably won't fall to this code block. So this all gets ignored, and then it just does this over and over and over and over again until it hits the correct database size, which is where we go to now here, where this is where it is the big data, it is the full database size. We've met the minimum database size. Gosh, it's so much easier when you're just like cutting videos instead of just talking for like an hour. This is exhausting. Anyway, so yeah, we've met the database size that we set in utils.py. Database size is big enough. Let's start doing stuff. So this is where the bot is now going to try to perform actions. But first, before we perform actions, let's see if we're supposed to sleep. And this is where the sleep schedule comes into play. If somebody has configured it to use the sleep schedule, then we will go into this loop, and you'll see it's another while loop, and it runs this function called should we sleep, which is a disgustingly complex function that I hope nobody ever goes through and reads. But this is the whole function to decide if we should sleep. And it's I'll go through it really quick if I can. I don't know if I can explain all this, but basically we want to get the first run. And to get the first run, because it's a stupid ass document database, we have to loop through everything and find our key that says first run. And then we want to get that first key. So we get the value of first run. And then we have to get all of the schedules and sort them. So here we have all the bot schedules in this variable, and we're supplying it to this sorted function, and it sorts them based off of the number of days, I believe. Yeah, the day value. So then we go through each day in the sorted schedule. And what do we do here? I have no idea. Day epoch. We're turning days. What is even happening here? Times day. Int day, days. Oh, okay, got it. So check it out. Basically, you decide which day you want the bot to change its schedule. So this is how many days since the first run. That's why we're getting the first run here. We get the value of the first time we ran the bot, and then we want the schedule to do something on the third day. So basically, it grabs days, which will be an integer. It'll be 3, 4, 5, 7, 10. And then it multiplies that by how many seconds are in a day. Okay, so this is an integer value here, which is 86,400 seconds is the number of seconds in a day. So if we multiply this number by 4, that is going to give us the number of 4 days and seconds. And so that's how we calculate how many days have passed since the first time that we ran the bot. Well, that's not how we calculate it, but this is how we decide which schedule we use based off of the first time that we ran the bot. So if we go back to should we sleep, we'll see here that we're getting whatever the current time is, the current epoch time, which is the integer value. And then we're taking the first run time and we're adding that number of days to it. So what is the integer value or the epoch value of the first time that we ran the bot? Add 4 days to that. That's the day epoch, okay? So now we know what the first run is plus 4 days. So we have that integer value and we have what the current day is. So if the current epoch is greater than the day epoch that we have calculated, then we are going to assign that as the best schedule, and then we're going to throw all of the other schedules away. So imagine this in I'll show you here because it's probably difficult to understand this just by me talking, but this is how the schedule works, is that you supply these schedule values and you supply how many days from the first time that you run the bot that we should use that schedule. So here it's 0 days. This is the schedule it will use from 0 to 4 days. On the 4th day, it will do that calculation and it will see, oh, the current time is greater than 4 days in the future from the first time that we ran the bot. So now we use this schedule. So basically, if we had a 5th day or a 6th day or a 7th day, we're just checking to see if we have passed one of these days. If we have passed one of these days, then that is the next schedule that we need to use. So forget all the schedules after whatever the best schedule is. So that's basically what we're doing here. We're choosing the best schedule. So once the current epoch date is greater than the day that we have calculated, that is the best schedule, and we take that schedule and we assign it as best schedule to use. And then we have to go through that schedule to see, are we within the time to sleep? So is the schedule time between? Okay, this is another function that checks to see if the current time is between 2 times. It's so ridiculously, I have no idea how I made this work, but basically you provided a start time, an end time as a timestamp, and then this I think I got this on Stack Overflow somewhere, to be honest, but basically it checks to see if the current time is within 2 timestamps. So think of, that's how the schedule works, right? You are checking to see if the current time is between a bunch of values, and so that's what are we doing here? What is this? I want to get back to where this is utils.py. We want to be a DB. So is the current time between our scheduled times, right? Because we got the best schedule in this variable here, and best schedule could have multiple schedules. That's the thing about how the scheduling works, is that you can provide a bunch of schedules throughout the day. So let's say you don't want the bot to just be limited to waking up at 8 a.m. and then you only get to choose another accompanied stop time, right? So I want it to wake up at 8 a.m. and then it has to go to sleep at 5 a.m. But what if I want it to wake up again that same day? So we have to be able to provide the bot multiple schedules so that it can have a day cycle and a night cycle. And so that's basically what we're doing here. If I can go back to the schedule code, you can see here that these are actually two separate schedules, right? So we're saying after the 4th day, I want the bot to wake up at 8 a.m. and start doing its cycle. And then I want it to stop the cycle at 10 a.m. Then I want the bot to wake up again at 8:30 p.m. And then I want the bot to go to sleep at 11:20 p.m. So you can add a bunch of these schedules, and then the bot can wake up and go to sleep multiple times per day. So we have to check each of these schedules to see if the current time is within any of them. And that's basically what we're doing at this point. So best schedule can contain multiple schedules for that day. So we go through each of those schedules and we check to see, hey, is the current time between what we were looking at here, is it between 4 and 5? If it is between 4 and 5, then we have this checks variable where it does all the checks. If we're between the time, then checks is true. Add a true to checks. If it's not between the time, then add a false to checks. And so we get this checks variable that is a list of a bunch of true and false values. So if we get to the end of that, and if there is a true in checks, then we don't need to sleep because it means that we are within our schedule. So is this schedule that we're analyzing between our start time and our end time? And since we're checking that for all the schedules, if one of them is true, then there's no need to sleep. We're within one of the schedules that we have defined, so there's no need to sleep. So return false. So that's this whole function. This whole function is just figuring out, should we sleep? And it returns either true or false. So there is a true in checks. We are within a okay time window. So return false. We should not sleep. Don't sleep. If we're not within one of the time windows, then we do need to sleep. So we go true. So if we go back to init here, that's all the stuff being calculated here. If we're using a sleep schedule, keep checking if we should sleep. If we should sleep, if this is true, then we're just going to do the snooze, snore, and then we're going to wait 60 seconds. And then the bot will check every 60 seconds to see if we should keep sleeping. If this returns false, it breaks out of this whole block here, and then we start the magic. Magic happens. Go through the Reddit bot actions. So this is actually, that I think I understand a bit more of what this 0 might be. It might be supplying rate limiting information. So you'll see that we have Reddit bot, right? That's defined here, Reddit bot. And then in this list of Reddit bot, it's all the different bot actions. So we're basically looping through all of those actions. And if one of those actions, if the rate limit unlock epoch, which I think is this 0, I think it's that 0 here. I think that's what we're setting. If that is not equal to 0, then we hit the rate limit for one of these actions. These are all per action rate limits. So that's all of this code. We're basically just checking to see if we have hit rate limits. And if we have hit rate limits, then we wait. We do some waiting stuff. So if this action that we're currently going through is not rate limited, then let's check if we should run it. And that's what we're doing here. So this is, if it's rate limited, then we need to do some waiting or something else. If not, then go here and run the probability. So we'll see, we have this function here from utils.py where it just basically generates a random number. So we have this random number, and then we have the probability, and we're passing the probability into this function. And then it just either returns true or false. So is the random number that we generated smaller than the probability that we have assigned? If it's smaller, then it returns true. And so here's our action, right? We're looping through all of our actions here, Reddit bot, for each action in there. It's not rate limited. So let's go down and let's check if it should run. And so we supply the probability value of the action to probability. If that returns true, then run the action. That's it. So it will say making a random and then the action name. And that's kind of an old string when the bot would just post or comment. It didn't have any other action, so it would say making a random comment, making a random post. But now that it does a lot more actions, we should probably change that. And then it just runs it. Action.action. So this is the action defined here. This is the action. We're setting the action here. And if we go back down, did I go too far? Yeah. So if that action probability is true, then run the action associated with that action. So it'll do a delete. It might make a post. It might do whatever, but this is where it's calculated. This is where it chooses what to do. And here we can see this is more rate limiting code. So if pra has a API exception, then we get that information and we just tell the bot to wait, just chill out a little bit. And it just wait. It sleeps a little bit. Sleeps for some time, and then it goes back through the process of calculating everything. So there is a separate action here. Oh, that's very interesting. So there is always a probability to learn each cycle. I forgot all about this. So learning is actually not a so each cycle, I think only one of these actions can happen. Only one of these can happen per cycle. And when we hit, we do that action and then we move on. But learning is totally separate. There is a chance to learn every single cycle. So we'll see, you'll see we're doing the probabilities here as well. Same thing, calculate the probabilities of learn. And if it's true, then do the learn. So it's possible for it to run an action and learn every single cycle. So that's it. That's how the bot works. No, really, that's it. After this, we hit the countdown and we start all over. Start all over again. Is the database size big enough? It is big enough. Okay, cool. So go down here. It is big enough. Run this line of code. Should we sleep? Calculate if we're using a schedule. Check to see if we're going to run an action right now. Are we rate limited? Then wait a little bit and start over again. And then a chance to learn. And then it does that over and over and over and over and over until the bot gets banned or something like that. So where's all the interesting stuff? The interesting stuff is the actions, right? Like, how do we perform these actions? Well, that's all in this Reddit.py here. And a lot of this stuff is pretty much still the same. It's gotten a bit more complicated, but like, this is the original thing. I remember first building the bot and I was like, I'm never going to get this thing done. How am I going to make all this work? But like, this was the big file that was a challenge to put together. You can see it's about 450 lines of code. And this is what all of the Reddit interactions, this is where all the Reddit interactions are located. So you'll see again, we're importing stuff from utils.py and, you know, we need that stuff. We're also importing stuff from database, maybe? No. Okay, anyway, we're importing a bunch of stuff that we're going to use. So what happens here? This is so remember I said earlier you can pass command line arguments to the Linux script and then they get passed to run.py. Well, that uses this library that handles the arguments. I forget what it's called. I think it's argparse here. So this argparse in utils.py, we're actually defining a function, and that function uses argparse to see if you added any command line stuff that we're looking for. Username, password, client ID, secret, user agent. If you want to pass in a subreddit list, you can do that as well. And so this function basically just returns those values if they exist. Now they may not exist, and that's fine. So we're running get args, and that puts all of those in this args variable. So we just check to see, does args.username exist? If args.username exists, then you're probably trying to run using the command line flags. And so we set these variables using the arguments there. So args client ID, args secret, args password, all of that gets set to these Python variables. Then we're setting up this is where praw gets set up, and this is where we're handling the client ID, the secret, to praw to create this API object that lets us interact with the Reddit API, and that's what drives all of the Reddit interactions, is this API. So this is just to check to see, do we need to get this information from the command line that the user passed, or should we get it using the settings file? If you didn't supply it from the command line, then we're going to try to import it from the settings file. And you can see here we're doing import settings, and then we are getting the values directly from settings and assigning them to these Reddit variables once again. And then here we are as well doing the API Reddit object formation. And that's it. So we either do one or the other. Either you're running it from the command line or you're getting it from the settings file. Then we're getting into some wild stuff here. So I really don't understand how the push shift stuff works. Basically, a long time ago, we were able to get old posts from Reddit from praw, and we could supply a date time value to say we want posts from a year ago, we want posts from 2 years ago. But then they disabled that, so we couldn't repost things anymore. But somebody in the community was like, oh, hey, there's a push shift API. We could just scrape push shift to find posts from a year ago that had a lot of karma or whatever. And they were like, would you be cool with adding that? And I was like, make it. And so this isn't even my code. I didn't write this stuff, but it even has caching. Somebody else implemented caching for it. So this is basically, we're checking a subreddit, search a subreddit for submissions withing. Yeah, we need to update some strings here. Submissions with a given time range. So this goes out to the push shift API, and we say we want a bunch of submissions from this subreddit between this time and this time. So typically we check like a year ago with like a week window. So pull all the posts from this week. And that's pretty much what we're doing here. We're just getting a list of submissions from some time ago in this push shift search thing. And then we're doing okay. I have no idea what happens here. Are these the same thing? Get submissions? Push shift search? Search subreddit for submissions within a given time range. Paginate function to retrieve all the submissions between a given interval. Okay, so maybe this is like a helper kind of thing. I have no idea. No clue. No idea how this works, but basically it returns a list of submissions. That's all that matters here. We're getting posts from PushShift that are from a year ago, and then we can decide whether we want to use those submissions or not. So it gives you a submissions object. That's it. Getting all of the submissions. between date range. Then there's this get top subreddits. Are these even used? I don't even know. Oh yeah, it is used down here. Huh. How does that even? I don't know. Anyway, get top subreddits, scraper for redditlist.com. Okay, so this is another helper sub. This is how we get the list of subreddits to pull submissions from. So we want to pull stuff from like top subreddits, like big subreddits. And we get those top subreddits and we set a minimum subscriber list. So there has to be at least 50,000 people subscribe to the subreddit list or to the subreddit before we would pull them. So we're using redditlist.com here as well, which I didn't know, but I do now. And we're paginating through it and apparently scraping it. Yeah, look at that. We're going through spans, go through a span, class, list strat. This is very bad. Don't ever scrape websites and rely on them like this, because as soon as redditlist.com changes their site, this is screwed and it won't work. But basically here it's just paginate. It's going through and it's getting all of this information from redditlist.com to give us a list of subreddits. Basically, that's it. Get the top subreddits. Submission time span. What does this do? I have no idea what this does. I don't even think it's used. It's not used anywhere. Okay, so this was this is vestigial at this point. At one point it seems to have served a purpose, but it doesn't anymore. But deleting comments does. Oh, maybe it gets exported. I'm not really sure. Anyway, deleting comments. So here's the deleting comment action, right? That was defined in init. Delete comments right here. Delete comments. Here's a Reddit action. So what does it do? It goes through this API object. This is our pro API object. We're grabbing a Redditor object, which is going to be our user. And we're grabbing all of their submissions and their comments and basically everything they posted. We're getting the last 500 items that were posted on that account, either comments or posts, I believe. And then we're checking to see if the score on that is less than the score threshold that we've defined in utils.py. If it's less than we want to go through and delete that stuff. So we check to see, is it a comment? Oh, I guess it only does comments. Does it only do comments? No, it does both. It does both. So we're checking, is the current item that we're looking at an instance of pro.models.comment? If it is, then we're just going to notify we're deleting the comment. This was the body. This was the score. This was the subreddit. This is logging information. And then we get that item and we call the delete function on that item, and then it deletes it from Reddit. And so you can see here we might have some API errors. So unable to delete. If we have an error message, then just save that. And this is the count so that we can show how many things that we deleted. And here is more logging information to say we deleted this number, many of comments with less than vote, whatever. And then it goes else. So we're checking to see, is this an instance of comment? If it's an instance of comment, let's run the comment code. If it's not, then we know it's a submission. So we're going to do all the same stuff, but we're going to do it for the submission code. So it still does the delete, but we're just saying submission to make some distinctions here. All the same stuff here, doing the count and then reporting the count. So that's how we delete stuff. That's the code for doing a delete. We just grab the user, check the last 500 things, see what the score is. If the score is too low, delete it and move on. So now we have the shadow check. So this is how we check if we are shadow banned. Really simple. We just do a request to the JSON endpoint for the user. And if it returns a 404, then the user is shadow banned, because you wouldn't use an account that doesn't exist. And this 404 returns if if the account doesn't exist. Technically it doesn't exist. It exists, but it was shadow banned, but Reddit won't show that account info anymore in this URL. And so it returns a 404, and since we put the account information in there, we know if it returns a 404 on an account that we created, then it was shadow banned. So yeah, check to see if there was an error in the response of checking that user. If there is an error and it is 404, then we know the account is shadow banned. So we just exit. We just do system.exit and the bot stops. And then we just do a little message. The account is shadow banned, poor bot. And if it's not, then just say it's not shadow banned. It's not. Everything's cool. Move on. And that's the shadow check right there. That's just how we check if things are shadow banned. And then we have the random submission. And this is very complicated. There's no way I'm going to be able to explain this, but I'm going to try, because there's a lot of stuff here that is just, whoa, gosh. Okay, so end date pi, and the end date is, okay, so this is interesting. The end date pi. So remember, when we're searching submissions, we need to provide a start date and an end date. So here's where we start generating that info. We're getting the current date right now, and then we are subtracting the number of days for the post to be old. Okay, so whatever the current time is, then get a time delta. Okay, and that's, yeah, that's the, basically it's a date time object so that we can do math here, so that we can do this submission. So date time, time delta, I want a date time object from this many days ago. And this value here is set to, we can see here, it's set to 365. So we're looking 1 year ago. We're creating a date time object from 1 year ago, and we're subtracting it from now to get the end date. And then, what are we doing here? What is ED? Oh, it's a date time object, so we have to convert it to an epoch. Let's go with epoch. So we have to convert it to an epoch value, because it's easier to do date time math when you're dealing with epochs. So we have this date time, and we're getting the epoch value, and then we're subtracting our epoch. Yeah. Total seconds. So this is the current time minus the end date pi. And this is giving us our official end date. I don't know what I just said. I have no idea how that works, but it works. So we have the end date time, and then we have the start date. And this is the time window that we want to look from. So how do we calculate the start date? Well, we look at the end date, which is 1 year ago from today. And this is then creating another time delta from 1 day ago. So it's basically creating a time delta object, and then we can subtract that from other date time objects. So remember, this is a date time object. This is a date time object. This is an integer value. That is the epoch time. So we still have this end date time value. We can use this date time time delta thing to subtract a day from it. And then that date time object becomes our start date, and then we have to convert that to an epoch time as well, which is the total seconds since January 1st, 1970. So our start date is always going to be 1 day before our end date. So I was wrong. We're not looking at a week window. We're looking at a 1 day window. Start date is before the end date, and then we have that info. We know what window of time we want to search for post for on a specific subreddit. I'm sure none of this stuff that I'm saying is making sense, but we're going to go through it anyway. So this is where we check to see, are we only supposed to look in specific subreddits? If we're only supposed to look in specific subreddits, then we go through the subreddit list and we add those to a thing. Subreddits. Okay, so we're creating a list of these subreddits, and we have to transform them into a subreddit object, basically, because the person that coded that reposting stuff created this custom subreddit object. And so we have to create a list of these custom subreddit objects, and we can actually see where they defined it. It's in utils.py. I hope this doesn't, yeah. So if we go to utils.py, here's the subreddit object, and this is basically it's a named tuple, and so it's called subreddit, and it should contain a list of name, rank, URL, subscribers, type. So we have to create this for each subreddit name, basically. And here you can see Reddit bot action. So this is a name tuple, Reddit bot action, name, action, probability, and then the rate limit, unlock epoch. Okay, so that's what that value was. It was the time until the rate limit has ended for that action. So these are just some custom objects. We go back over here and we're creating that custom object. Name is equal to the subreddit name, which we're getting from subreddit list, which is defined in utils.py. Here, this is where you would add subreddits that you want to limit the bot to learning and posting from. So here's where we check that. Okay, subreddit list is defined. Only use these subreddits. Create a custom named tuple object for well, I guess it's not an object, it's a named tuple. Totally different things, maybe, I don't know. And we're adding them to this subreddit list with some default values because it doesn't matter, basically. The values here don't matter. But if we're not using the list, the bot has to randomly figure out where it should pull data from. So what does it do? It creates this same subreddit objects from the get top subreddits function that we looked at earlier. So you'll see down here, it's doing the same thing. It's generating a list of subreddits and it's appending them, except here we actually have the information from the Reddit list website. So it's pulling this, find the rank of the sub, find the URL, how many subscribers, the type. Here it matters because we want to try to get the best subreddit that we can, or maybe the biggest subreddit that we can, because you can maximize your karma earnings on submissions if you do it on bigger subs. So that's this is doing the same thing pretty much, but it's grabbing the list from Reddit list and it's doing it based off of does the number of subscribers for that subreddit is it smaller or greater than the minimum subscribers that we have defined in our parameter here. So this is just giving us a list of those same custom tuples. Where was I? We were all the way down here. Random submission, right? Yeah. So get top subreddits. We're getting the same thing, a list of these named tuple subreddit lists, except they have more accurate information here for subscribers and rank and everything. So we have that list and check to see. So this is where the disallowed subreddit list comes into play. Since we're just randomly grabbing the best subreddits, maybe you have defined you have to find one of those subreddits to be in the disallowed list. So we go through this list that was created and we check to see if any of those custom subreddit name tuples has the same name as a subreddit in the disallowed list. And this is just it's a list comprehension that quickly loops through our subreddit list, checks to see if there's a match. If there's a match, then it doesn't add it into this new variable. So we're creating a clean variable that doesn't have any of the disallowed subreddits. So cool. Now we have this list of subreddits, and it could have either been supplied by the user, or we could have randomly got it from this function here. So what do we do after that? We go through each subreddit, and here is where we try to find all of the submissions that we want to potentially repost. So we're going through all of the posts within the time window that we set. But we want all the big upvote posts, right? Like we want the posts that got a lot of attention, that got a lot of success in those subreddits within that time. So we get the submissions, and okay, so that's what get submissions does. This is what actually gets the submissions. Get submissions, we give it the start date. Remember, this is the start date to look, this is the end date to look, and this is the subreddit name. So this get submissions is what actually pulls the submissions that we will potentially repost, and they get added to here in tops. These are the top posts for that period. But we want all the big upvote ones, right? We want the big stuff. So we have a minimum score here. If the subreddit doesn't meet the minimum score, then it gets filtered. And that's basically what's happening here. We have a nameless function, a lambda function, and so we're passing it through to we're passing this function into filter, and filter will filter the list that we're passing in. So we're passing in tops. This tops here is all the subreddits, and each subreddit will be evaluated. And so it will go through the first item, and that first item will become item here. This is the parameter for a nameless function. And then we're just going to check, does that subreddit score, is it greater than or equal to minimum score? If it's greater than or equal to minimum score, cool, keep it. If not, throw it away. So we filter it, and that way we only have the upvoted posts that meet our minimum post requirement. So we want to check total posts is all the posts that we are going to be posting. And I'm not sure why we're deleting this here. I think it might have been a memory issue. This might have been causing memory issues, having this this value here for some reason. I don't remember why, but we have total posts, and okay, because it's going through every subreddit. Got it. All right. So since we're going through every subreddit, we're grabbing the top posts from a bunch of subreddits. So big upvote posts would just be for a single subreddit. And then we have total posts, and total posts is all of the big posts for all of the subreddits that we want to check. So that's why we're doing it here. We're assigning an empty one that we go through. We get all of the biggest upvotes, the most upvoted posts for a certain subreddit, and then we add all of those posts to total posts. And we do that for every subreddit. And then we have this list here called total posts, and it has all of the potential submissions that we're going to repost. And so what do? We just pick one at random, because this is the best of the best. These are the best posts from the best subreddits based off of our analysis, and just pick one. It doesn't matter. Choose one, and we assign it to this variable. And then what do we do here? We make our submission. That's it. API submission. The ID will be the post to repost, and then for some reason here, oh, okay, I see. This is cool. Somebody helped add this, or maybe advised me to do it, but we check to see if this post has already been posted by us in the past 20 posts. So that's why we're getting the ID here. So this should not be random sub. I think this should be random post. Yeah, I have no idea. Anyway, so for submission, so we loop through all of the stuff that we recently posted, the last 20 things, and we check to see if submission.title is equal to random post.title. It should not be random sub. It should be random post.title. So if one of the things that we've posted in the last 20 posts is the same thing, then we already posted that. So we just skip posting. Forget it. We're not going to post. We could probably have it go back into the list and choose another random one. That would probably be more efficient. It'd be something to consider. But at the moment, it just exits from reposting. So here we are. And we're checking if we have a random post. Does one exist? Did we get a successful random post? Okay, if so, let's try to repost it. So what do we do first? We check to see if it's a self post or if it's a like an image post, right, with a URL. So that's all we're doing here. We're just checking, is the random post that we chose a self post? If that's true, then we want to put the title and we want to put the self text in as our parameters. If it's not, then we want to grab the title and we want to grab the URL. And then we come down here and this is it. This is where it finally makes a post. So it goes to API subreddit. We have our random post, which has a subreddit object on it. And then we can get the display name of that subreddit. So we're saying we want to post to this subreddit and we want to post these parameters. And so there's the params that we're defining here. And basically this syntax just spreads out the, so we have an object here, and this is some obscure, I don't even remember how I found this, but if you put these double stars in front of a Python object, it spreads them out to parameters rather than passing a single thing. It passes title is equal to whatever this title is, and self text is equal to, so it's not passing a single object, it's spreading out this object into multiple parameters for the submit function on praw, because that's what it is. It's looking for a title and a URL, or a title and a self text, and then it knows how to post to that subreddit. So that's it. It does the post, and if it works, we're done. That's the post. So then we have random reply, which is also a bit complicated. So let's see if we can go through all this. Making a random reply. First, we want to choose a random submission from our all that is currently hot. So we want to choose a post that is going somewhere that probably has a lot of comments on it. So we just do, if we're using subreddit list, then grab it from our subreddit list. So then that is our subreddit. What is this submission thing being assigned? Okay. So, did I screw this up? I guess we'll find out. So then we're getting a submission, and oh no, wait, yeah, if subreddit list, choose a random subreddit from subreddit list, and then supply that to our submission here to get a random submission from hot. So here's subreddit, and then we're doing API subreddits, get all of the hot lists from this subreddit, turn it to a list, and then once it's a list, we can use random.choice, and we get a random submission from our subreddit list. If we're not using subreddit list, then we're going to go and randomly choose a subreddit. So we're checking, is this subreddit okay? And that's defined as false. And we're going to keep doing this code until we find a sub that is okay. So I'll explain why that happens. So while sub is equal to false, sub is equal to false. So we're going to go down here and we're going to do the API subreddit are all. And when you do all, it just gives you a random subreddit. That's all that happens. So then we're doing sub display name lower strip everything. If the subreddit is not in our disallowed list, then sub okay is true. And this will break. It will break out of this loop. So basically what we're doing is we're going to keep looking for a subreddit until we find one that is not in the block list. That's all that we're doing here. We just want to get a random subreddit, but we can't get all of them because somebody may have defined something in the block list. So we have to loop through it until we find a subreddit that is okay. Did we find a subreddit that's okay? Cool. Get that subreddit. So this will keep being reassigned until it has a good subreddit name. So then we want to get all of the hot submissions from that subreddit, turn it to a list, and then we randomly choose a submission that's hot on that subreddit. So we have our submission. Where are we? Now we have our submission object here. So what do? We grab all of the comments from that submission, and basically submission.comments.replace more. You'll notice that like when you're looking at Reddit posts, so sometimes it'll say click to see more. Well, that limitation is in the UI. And so if you want, that limitation is in the API as well. So you can apply limit is equal 0 and it will just get you all of the comments. So replace the more replies with all of the replies. So we get all of the comments for submission that we found. So then we're going to get the subreddit name. And this is where we generate the subreddit brain files. So you'll notice that we have the main brain.db, but we also have an individual subreddit brain database as well. So we learn both, basically. What are we doing here? We're getting the subreddit name from the submission. And then we're saying that this brain is going to be our database directory plus the subreddit name. And then we're just using this format string here so that this will become our database directory and this will become our new .db file. And this is just a string right here. That's all we're doing. We're creating a string and we're outputting the string. And then we're checking to see if the file exists. Oh, if it doesn't exist. Wait, so do we only learn once? Is that what that code does? Really? Wait, do the small databases do nothing? If not, if the database does not exist, that's all we're checking here. That's what this glob is. It's checking to see If the database does not exist, then learn using the subreddit name. Why would we learn using the subreddit name? What? Oh, I guess that creates the database. I guess that's what creates the, okay. So here's, yes, got it. Okay, so the learn function can take a parameter. So you'll see you can supply a subreddit name. What happens when you supply a subreddit name? Let's see. Okay, so here it does all of this checking stuff. Does the database exist? Blah, blah, blah. If subreddit. Okay. Okay. Oh gosh. Okay, so this is run.py, which is another massive yeah, so this is the learn function, which is in run.py, which is another massive thing. The learning is a bit complicated. So I guess we're going to look at this really quick. So what happens when you tell the bot to learn? First, we check to see if the database exists. Is it a file? And if it is, output the file name. So I guess this is why we report the database size quite often, except this is out of, this should probably be gone. Let's not talk about that. Let's pretend that doesn't exist. So we're getting the database size. Oh gosh, this is all bad. Oh, this is bad. Oh, this is very bad. This is not, you can't check the database. I guess you can. Yeah, it's checking the main database. So this should still work. Size here will still be the real database size. If size is greater than the main database max size, then we've reached the database size limit and it'll stop learning. You'll see that it returns here. So we check, okay, so it checks the database size. If the database size is greater than main database max size, we stop learning and it just stops here. So every time we try to learn, it's just going to stop because we've reached the max learning database size. If not, then let's try some other stuff here. So if a subreddit name is supplied, here we go. We we are, what are we doing here? Oh, we check to see if the subreddit exists. That's what we're doing. Excuse me. Just drink some water. How long have I been talking here? This has been a minute now. Anyway, first we want to see if the subreddit exists. If it doesn't exist, then there's no point in trying to do anything. So we just return, just get out. We don't know this subreddit. What is that subreddit? Okay, so if it exists, fine, cool, let's move on. Else, if subreddits, then so that just checks to see if the subreddit exists. Learning from, anyway, else if is it subreddit list supplied? If subreddit list is supplied, let's get the subreddit name, and then we're gonna learn from that. So we're getting a subreddit object. So it seems like we're just generating subreddit objects here. That's what we're trying to do. We're trying to figure out which subreddit we want to learn from. And you can either supply a subreddit, and that will be the subreddit object that we learned from. So we're creating sub here. Or maybe so you can supply subreddit directly to the function. Or we'll check and see if you have subreddit list selected. And if subreddit list is selected, then we're going to get the sub from subreddit list. So if somebody has supplied a subreddit to the function, that takes precedence over the list. And if you're not using the list, then we get a random subreddit. So I was wrong, actually. If you do subreddit all, I think it's going to grab all of the top posts. But if you do random, it grabs a random post. So I misspoke earlier. All will grab all subreddits basically, or top subreddits or something like that. But random will give you one random subreddit. So these 3 lines are basically to just figure out what subreddit are we going to learn from. And here we do some checks when we're getting a random subreddit. We just want to make sure that random subreddit is not in the disallowed list. If it's not in the disallowed list, then check to see if it's over 18. We don't want to be reposting in not safe for work subs. And also, we want to make sure that it is a subreddit with a lot of subscribers, because there's no point in reposting to subreddits that nobody uses because you're not going to get any karma. So if all of those are okay, then sub okay is true, and then we're going to break out of this while loop. So this is kind of the if nothing else is configured option. Choose a random subreddit. If they didn't supply a subreddit, then check if the subreddit list is in use. If subreddit list isn't being used, then just randomly find a subreddit to learn from. So we are creating 2 brain databases from here. I think. This is the sub database, and notice we're doing this format string thing again. And we're generating the string value. We're outputting what is the active database that we're saving to. And then we're creating our Kobe brain object. So this is the brain that we have over, I'm trying to hit control. No. But brain comes from somewhere. So you'll see here, our bot directory. This is where Kobe exists. Kobe.brain, import brain, logging, utils main DB. So we're creating this brain object, and this is Kobe. This is where Kobe comes into play and handles tokenizing all of the comments and basically building out the database files. It's this little base brain object here, but we can create multiple instances of this brain. So you supply the brain a file. This brain gets supplied a file. So we're supplying it the main database file here. But over here, over here we want to create a database based off of the subreddit. So that's why we're importing that brain instantiator, and we're creating a new brain object. So this is the subreddit brain object. And here's where we're generating the subreddit brain database name. So it's going to point to the database path. It's going to have the subreddit name .db. We create this new brain object. And then we're going to get all of the hot submissions from that subreddit. Here's our subreddit object that we chose through one of these options, and get a list of submissions, all the hot submissions. So we have sub hot. Cool. So now go through every single submission in those hot submissions. And then what do? We do the same thing with the comments here. We're doing submission, comments, replace more, limit 0, get the full list of comments. And then we are getting the list. So this populates the list here. Doing this populates this list. So this comments thing is empty until you do get comments, replace more, or it may not have the full output. So by doing this, running this, we'll get the full output of comments, and we assign it here. And now we have all the comments. These are all the comments for a bunch of hot or this current hot submission that we're looking at. So then what do? Now we're going to loop through all of those comments, and we have some conditions as well. first we want to make sure that the comment body is less than 240 characters, because if you have the bot learning really long texts, it tends to just have really garbled statements. So I found that limiting the size of the comments that it learns will have it learn more concise comments. And that's what we want it to produce. Just like short, easy comments that may or may not be reasonable to wherever they're commenting. Also, we only want to learn comments that were upvoted. We don't want to learn really bad comments that people have downvoted. So we checked, as we're looping through the comments, we check to see if it's the right size. We check to see if its score value is greater than 20. Now, we also want to make sure that we learn comments as an observer. So we don't want to learn the comments from whoever made the post, because then, I mean, they would be commenting from kind of like an authoritative perspective maybe, and it could change the language that they're using. But basically, we just want to learn from people that are observing and commenting on stuff. So we filter out comments from the author of the post, and then we get the comment body. And this is actually where the disallowed word list comes in. So we go through each word in the comment and we check if it's in the disallowed word list. If it's in the disallowed word list, we just do a replace and replace it with nothing. So this is how it removes like whatever words that you've put in there. Also, you can log the learned comments, but this was generating so much logging output that I just, I made it a configurable thing. So then here we go. This is where we learn. So we're learning the comment to our base brain. This is the brain that every subreddit will be learned to. But we also have the subreddit brain, and we're passing the comment body into the brain's learn function. This is Cobe's learn function. So you pass it a string, and then Cobe does all of its magic to break down and tokenize the comment, and then build a graph around the occurrences and the frequency of occurrences. And then it uses its Markov chain algorithms based off of the graph database that was generated to try and make a best effort at meaningful comments. And that's it. So that's learning. That's how the learning happens. We're either given a subreddit, or we randomly choose a subreddit from our subreddit list, or we randomly choose any subreddit that we can, and then we use these brains in bot.py to learn, and we also create a subreddit. So that's learning. So we can come back here now, and we can see how this is basically creating the subreddit database. So we're recreating this string value here, which points to the subreddit database, and we're checking to see, does that file exist? If it doesn't exist, then learn with the subreddit name. I don't know why we do that. Maybe we'll find out later. Anyway, bot.brain. Okay, so now we're generating the reply. And this reply is going to be, oh no, it's checking the main database. If the main database doesn't exist, I think we found a bug. I think that's what we found here. If this is brain, and brain is going to be, no, this is going to be the subreddit, and subname is submission subreddit display name. Log that. If not, if the file does not exist, then learn. The subreddit brain does not exist, then learn. And that's going to create the value. And then here's our subreddit brain, our reply brain. So it tries to reply from the subreddit brain first, I guess. That's what we're doing here. But it seems like it's not going to, it just stops learning. Because this should be true. It should be if this file exists, then learn. But it seems like it only learns once. It will learn the subreddit. It will save and learn to the subreddit brain once, and then after that, it never learns to that again. No, but it does. It does. But why are we doing this once? Maybe if it doesn't exist. That's probably it. Okay, so check if it doesn't exist. If it doesn't exist, just learn so that we can actually instantiate the reply for that brain. I guess that's what's happening. Okay, so maybe sometimes it doesn't exist, so we need to learn so that it creates that database, and then we can instantiate a brain object, a code brain object, and then we can start doing stuff and interacting with it. So that's probably why it was coded that way. So anyway, we have our subreddit brain now. So what do? We have our subreddit. We have our subreddit brain, and we attempt to learn from that subreddit brain so that we have some data from it. And with this reply brain, we can now do replies. This was some other stuff that was happening, but basically, now we're going to choose if we are going to reply directly to somebody else's comment, or we are going to reply directly to the submission. And so that's basically what's happening here. We're doing the same probability stuff. So there is a larger chance that we'll reply to somebody's comment. Maybe that's not true anymore. I might have changed that. This is it's pretty high. I think it's set pretty high. So it's like I guess like a 35% chance. I don't know how the probabilities really work. I don't know anything about math. I have no idea how I built this. But basically, this is just deciding if we're going to reply to a comment. If this is true, then we're going to reply to a comment. And so what does it do? It's checking to see. Here we go. Comment. This is the comment. Random choice. Get a random comment from the submissions, the comment list submission. That's the comment. And then we're going to create a response. So it's using the reply brain, right? And it's saying, give me a reply to this comment. So it actually tries to make the responses somewhat contextually relevant, I would say. Doesn't always work that way, but so first we're going to try to generate a response from the subreddit brain. Okay, so we have our response. Now, if the bot has not learned enough, it's going to say this. It's going to say, I don't know enough to answer you yet, but we don't want the bot to say that to people. So if I don't know enough to answer you yet is in response, then we haven't learned enough from that subreddit. So we're going to use the main database. So you can see we're creating another string here to our main database. We instantiate another bot object, and then reply brain becomes the main database object, and we generate another reply. We're doing another reply here to this comment body, and then we have the response. And so what do? We have our comment object. This is the Reddit comment object. So we can do a reply on it. So we do comment.reply with our response from the bot. And then it says, I replied with comment, replied to comment, and replied with. Now, if you're responding to a submission, it's doing all that same stuff, but it's going to just respond directly to the submission. But what does it use to generate the reply? It uses a submission title. So that's why sometimes when it's replying directly to a submission, it's somewhat contextually relevant because we're feeding the submission title into the reply brain. And that's it. So then it makes the comment, and it makes a random comment either to a submission or it makes a random comment to the post, and that's commenting. And then this was something that I was trying to do for some like, I was trying to do some other thing to see about sneaky marketing on Reddit, and like it worked. It really worked, but I didn't get the data that I was looking for to create a video about it. So I gave up on that. So that code doesn't matter. What is this? With open JSON. Oh yeah, this is just all this share thing to do. If you want to market some website or something, you can have it randomly choose comments to promote your site or whatever you want to promote, really. So that's reddit.py. Those are all the actions in our reddit.py. We have push shift stuff where we're getting lists of subreddits, finding good subreddits, finding top subreddits, and then we're using that data to make decisions. We're deleting comments. We're making shadow ban checks. We're doing random submissions, and then we are making random comments, and that's it. That it? That's it. Yeah, that's really it. I mean, then we have utils.py, which is obviously where all of the configuration and stuff happens. So you're well aware, and we have lots of helper functions in here to help decide things. So here's our check internet function, get seconds to wait, all helper stuff, get public IP. This is caching that has been enabled so that we're not constantly hitting subreddit list and push shifts API. Somebody developed some caching mechanism. We have some helper functions to convert bytes to different sizes. Is past one day. I have no idea where that's used. Here's the countdown thing that I thought it would do a countdown on the command line, but it didn't. Here's our probability check again. Is time between. So this is utils.py, which is just a lot of helpers. And then I guess we can look at the database. I mean, this is the new thing. This is our TinyDB database, and this is where we're storing a bunch of stuff. So we have this TinyDB instance, and it just points to a JSON file. So it's all the database stuff is just in a database JSON file, and we're just using the TinyDB directives. So we're creating a table, quote unquote, and it's called dates, and then I have a table called common and a table called config, and then we can run queries on all of this stuff. So you see we're getting all of the karma here, right? Like this is getting all of the data that have a timestamp associated with our karma values at that timestamp. And so if we want to generate a chart, we have to get all of the karma data. So that's what we're doing here. Just grab all the karma data and return it. All of our database sizes to create a chart, grab all the database sizes and return it. Set the user info. So we're getting all of the info from the Reddit user API. See, we just do it right here. API user me, get the JSON. You have to convert it because there's some special properties on it that break when you try to convert it, but then we're just dumping it into the database. And here we are as well, you know, just setting the user karma, setting the database size. This is all just database interactions. And yeah, so we can do a lot of stuff with the database here. We can do a lot of cool stuff to store information about the bot's experience. When did it start? When it is the last time it posted? How much karma did the user have at this time? How much did... yeah, so this database is what really enabled the user interface that was created as well. And that's it. I mean, that's the bot. Here's the disallowed words, disallowed subreddits, but that's how the bot works. It all starts with runlinux.sh calling run.py, and then run.py starts the web server process, which hooks into the bot's database. So as the bot is dumping data into its tiny database, then the web app can pull in that data while the bot is running without interrupting it. And then we start the bot's init process. And in init, we just do the cycle. We're just cycling through all, checking if we should run an action. And with conditionals for should we be sleeping? Are we the right database size? But that's it. Init here is just looping through and constantly checking, should I do this? Should I do that? And then based on the probabilities, it will choose to run one of those actions. And obviously those actions are here in reddit.py. So that is the long-winded video on how the Reddit karma farming bot works, and whew, I hope some of that made sense. I have not looked through the whole code base for a long time, so I was really just trying to understand things on the fly. Nobody's gonna watch a 2-hour video at all, for sure. I'm sure nobody's gonna do it, but people have asked me to create it, and so I was very happy to do that. That's it. Thanks for watching.